Hello everyone, I am Bradley Sward, Associate Professor of Computer and Information Science at the College of DuPage in Glen Ellen, Illinois. And this video today is going to look at GameMaker Studio version 2. We're going to use the actual GameMaker language, so no drag and drop interface. And we're going to look at pause screens, and to make pause screens work we have to look at basic surfaces. And after we look at basic surfaces, we will figure out how we could maybe advance this forward. I'll show you a quick little example. But it's kind of hacky, and if you know a better way to do things, I would love for you to teach me how to make things better to use surfaces in the future. So this is what we're going for the rest of this video here. We have this little screen. I just have something going. I'll show you what I did. This is just to have basically your game playing. This is my game, which really isn't interactive. It's just boxes moving around. And when I press the space bar, there we go, I just wasn't in the correct window, then the game will pause and all the objects will pause, and there is my little screen that comes up, and now when I hit space again, it goes right back, and obviously they come and go. I can't put my, you can see that this guy's going this way, and then he's still going, he should go this way when it starts back up again. Yes, and it does. And so that is, that is essentially the pause screen. And so what we're going to do to make this work, it's about a 3-4 step process, is when I want to pause the game, I have to set up what is called a surface. And a surface is just basically just memory, computer memory, just like the screen gets drawn to some part of memory. Like, when we draw things and like draw, when we can also draw not just to the screen, to the window, we can draw to secondary pieces of memory, and we call those surfaces. Well, I guess technically everything is technically a surface, but instead of drawing to the main surface, we can draw to our own surfaces. And in this case, what I did was I take the entire screen, I drew it to my personal surface, and then I went ahead and actually deactivated all the objects in my room. So basically all the objects no longer draw, they no longer update, but because I have this picture sitting, I grab this surface, that object or that sprite, that surface can get drawn to the screen instead. And so you're basically just keeping a snapshot and showing that until you unpause and reactivate everything and destroy the surface that you're using. So it's a pretty simple concept. But of course, the details are where things get a little messy. Not too bad comparatively once I got things working and I was able to simplify them a bit. But you can see that, like activating and deactivating objects can get messy if you're not paying attention, you're not doing everything correctly. So yeah, everything's spacebar, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay, so here is my room. I have these objects. I just called them mover objects. And then I have this object over here, which is basically the pause controller. It's like a controller object. It's just sitting over the screen, just waiting for you to press the space bar. And when you press the space bar, it either puts the game into pause or it puts the game back into play mode. And so my movers, pretty simple stuff. I just a simple sprite. I mean, just something, again, just to get things moving. I have this thing moving around the screen, 64 by 64. Let's see, mover objects. When I just give it a random direction and a random speed, just so they're all slightly different, so it's not just totally boring, it's just mostly boring. And then when they go outside the room, I basically just try to bring them back to center, and then I just give them a little randomness so that it's not going right back to the center, but it's going close to wherever the center is, and they just keep going and going and going. And just, they go off the screen, they come back to the middle, they go off the screen, they come back to the middle, and then, so nothing will ever get truly lost. I don't know if that's 100% true, but I can give you, I would say 99% odds that this will never turn out with one of my little mover objects going off the screen and getting lost forever. Okay, so that again, that occurs, or that allows for the movement of the objects, all of these guys in my room. And again, okay, so now that's normal stuff, right? That's just normal gameplay. Those are just normal gameplay elements. So what we want to be able to do now is to pause the game. So you could see I called it pause as state pattern. You could do it two different ways. You could set it up the way I did it here, where I just kind of put everything into one object. And then later on, if you want to get a little more fancy, You could create a script that'll create the object, and based on different key presses and things like that. Again, this is just to get you kind of going, just to kind of get your mind wrapped around the idea. And then once you have that, you can go ahead and just advance it. So here, when I create this thing, when I create this object, because this object can kind of be in one of two states, right? Because it's watching over the game. The game can be either playing, which is when everything is moving around, or it could be in the pause state, obviously, right? So it can one of two states that the game is in at any given time. And so what I do is I just set up basically an enumeration, and I haven't looked into it to see if there are enums. Let's see, enum, does it change color? Oh, yeah, it does. I'll have to look into how to set up enumerations. But this is how I've always done things over the years, and I've never had a problem with it, where I just set up these variables. So playing and paused are going to replace just hard-coded happy number, the happy numbers here, the 0 and the 1, so it's a lot easier to read, right? State equals playing. That is a lot easier to read than state equals 0, or state equals 1, or state equals whatever. And when I do things this way also, if I ever change my code, I never have to change the numbers, because then if it's like, oh no, paused is now 2. Well, now I got to go back and fix everything, but I don't have to change anything, because all I have to do is change the number here, and then the word will never change throughout the rest of my code. So, those happy numbers go away. Okay, so I set up my state. State is what I'm going to be going off of. Playing is the current state. And then I set up my surface. And again, you can go into looking things up. It gets rather complicated. I'll explain it again in part 2 here with the more advanced demo. But you can see here that at its core, I want to set up, I want to grab the whole screen. So I better create a surface that maintains the entire screen for its memory. So room width, that is, so I don't have to hard code it to, in this case, 1366 by 768, which is a terrible, who the heck, how did that even come to be? It should either be probably 720 or 1240 or even 1440p these days, right? So so if I change the size of my room, I don't have to come in here and change the size of my surface. It just automatically knows at this point what is the room width and what is the room height. So I set that thing up, and I maintain this reference to this surface, and that's because this takes up a ton of memory. You're taking up the entire screen, 32-bit color. So every pixel is 4 bytes of storage. So you can imagine this thing is taking up a ton of memory. And if you just willy-nilly just go and just create and not destroy, you're going to run out of memory pretty quickly. So the number one rule for this is when I create, I have to have a destroy, or in this case a free. I don't know why they call it different things. But in the destroy event for this object, I make sure that I give that memory back to back to my computer, back to the system when this object is destroyed. So I don't have a memory leak. GameMaker is pretty good with memory leaks, but there are more advanced topics like this, where if you forget that you are in control of this memory, you can end up crashing your system pretty badly, crashing your game anyway. So there we go. So this is the setup, this is the destroy, and then now figuring out how would I draw this thing, and what do I do when I press the space bar here. So here is my space bar. So if the state is playing, and this is basically, let's pause the game. That's what this is saying. And so it's actually pretty simple because you're doing a full screen grab. It's actually very simple. You're just saying and this is, you got to look this up, the application surface. That is the surface. That is what GameMaker draws to almost exclusively until you start taking over viewports and cameras and things like that. And I don't have anything crazy like that. This is just a very simple thing. And so I'm taking the application surface. I'm starting from location 0, 0 of that application surface, so the upper left-hand corner, and I'm grabbing the entire screen, and I'm copying all of that surface data into my surface. So now there's two separate things going on here. There's the application surface, which has everything drawn to the screen, and now mine. that basically is a copy. And the reason I need this copy is that I'm going to go right now and deactivate all the objects in the room. And by doing that, there's no more draw events, there's no more update events, but because there's no more draw events, every frame from now on in won't draw anything. So it's kind of crazy that way. But this true here says that this object, my pause as state pattern object, is not deactivated, but everything else in my room is deactivated. So that means that this object will step and will draw every game frame. And then once all of that is done, I can say now, okay, my game is officially paused now. And then the opposite is true. Like if the game, I'm not even talking about the drawing just yet, but just think of it logically here. Now when the state is paused and I press that space bar, I want to go back to playing the game. So I guess, so maybe just to so I'm a little more consistent here. I don't know what I just did here. Let's start the game back up. And so what I can do is I can activate all the objects again. That includes me, even though I'm still active. It doesn't much matter. It doesn't really change anything. And now I say the state is playing again. And we don't have to worry about creating and destroying this surface, because that would take up a lot of time and energy for the computer, basically time, to continually destroy and create and destroy and create. So we're just keeping the one surface active at all times. So we only destroy when this object gets destroyed, and we just keep copying over what we have when we need to. And so, again, this might not be, maybe it isn't the best way to do things, because it is taking up a ton of memory that might never be used. You might never even pause the game ever. So I say there's always these drawbacks, there's always these pluses and minuses, advantages and disadvantages to the designs that you've set forth. So maybe this isn't a good thing to have this thing active or this surface initialized all the time. But anyway, that's for another time. And so this is how you just go back and forth between playing and paused, playing and paused. And so in the draw event, this is what I do. So let me I know that's a lot, but essentially, if you just want the pause screen to be drawn without any little special effects or anything like that, you only need this. That's all you need. Let me just show you. Let me drag this over. So here's everything, and I press spacebar, and now everything is paused. And now you can see all I did was just say, hey, draw my surface to this main screen from 0, 0. Take the upper left-hand corner of my area and draw it to the screen, and that's it. And then when I press spacebar, everything kind of goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And so everything else was just kind of a little bit of a special effect. And like these 2 lines of code here, because a lot of times, because when you have a lot of objects doing a lot of drawing and like text and all sorts of things, you want to make sure that you put everything back, or you put everything into the state that you want before you call the actual draw. Because you don't want to trust that you or whoever else is working with you has put everything back into the proper state. Because if you forget and the wrong font is active or something like that, you're not going to get the results that you're thinking you're going to get. So this is like, okay, draw color to black, set my alpha just in case, and then draw my surface. So this won't change anything. At least for the way I have things set up. That doesn't do anything, but that's good for later on, if you have a more complex game. So then now this guy, I draw the surface first, I draw the screen, and now take a look. What do you think that does? That just darkens the whole screen. It takes the entire screen from 0, 0 to room width, room height, and in black, because that's the draw color, it adds a 40% alpha on top of it, so it darkens everything behind. Oh, that's happening because I haven't fixed everything back here. But that is kind of funny though. So it just keeps drawing wrongly. And now all of this here is to say, okay, bring me back to my alpha, set the draw color to white, text align this center and middle, and then right in the middle of the screen, so everything is perfectly centered, print out that little text message telling the user how to get out of the pause menu. Game paused. Or of course, if this was a game with more options, this is the part right over, wherever you're creating this thing, this is where you create all those extra objects that are going to do that are your pause menu. If you have all those extra, instead of just having something that prints, maybe, if you're going to put a menu in here or something like that, that is the place to do so. So there's a lot of code. There's a lot more going on here. So there's my draw event. And so now everything, let me make sure I did this right. So that's what I was saying about never trusting yourself or anyone else. When you want to print something, go out of your way to make sure that everything is set up like you're expecting it to. So dark. So nothing's wrong like it was a minute ago. But that is pretty much all there is to setting up that menu. Setting up this pause menu, this pause screen, using a surface. So now let me talk a little bit about. I made a little more advanced surface here for you to see, but it comes with extra responsibilities. And this is the part where, if you know how to do it a better way, I would love to be able to hear it. Okay, so because I couldn't get this thing to work 100%, or this, there's a lot going on behind the scenes here that I didn't pretty it up. Not that I have any art skills, but presume that this is a lake, or this is the water of a lake, and this is, the side of the lake. And here's my horribly drawn person that I just stole from the internet, or borrowed from the internet just to move things around. And so, lakes give reflections off of water. So as I get closer, you can kind of see what you see here is that you can see the person's reflection off of the water. And so that is what we're going for, but it turns out it's a little bit more complicated than you might anticipate it being. And that's because I understand why GameMaker does the things it does, but sometimes it's like, darn it, can't you help us out a little bit with these kind of things? And so one of the rules of surfaces are that no matter how you set it up, 0, 0 is always the upper left-hand corner. You can't give a surface an offset like you can for sprites. And so what happens here, under the hood here, I'm not using that object anymore. I just have this lake object. You can see all this here, and a hero. My little hero guy is just a sprite that moves around up, down, left, and right, just to try things out, and just, nothing complicated at all. Again, just to kind of show off the surface here. But here in this lake, what am I doing here? I'm setting up a surface. And now instead of, if I use the full screen for every surface, oh my word, is that going to use up a ton of, if I have hundreds of objects using surfaces, of course that's going to take up all of my memory, hundreds of megabytes that are just being wasted because you only need little parts. And if you're wasting memory, it's wasting efficiency setting that thing up and using it. But the problem here is if I say, okay, sprite width and 200 pixels for my surface, like, where is that thing? Where is this thing? Again, it's at 0, 0. It's the upper left-hand corner of the entire screen. And you're like, well, that's not good. I want it to be at the upper left-hand corner of the water. And you're like, yeah, I agree with you. Wouldn't that be great if I could just do something and say, okay, offset that surface now when I go to draw? But I can't. And that's why this, there's a lot, this here gets very complicated. And so what I have to do here is do this thing called surface set target, where I essentially have to draw, instead of drawing to the screen, I have to go ahead and draw objects onto my surface instead. So this is, again, that's why this is a lot more complicated here. I think I can get rid of this thing. Yeah, that doesn't work properly when I do things. So what I do here is I say, okay, I have my lake object, and I want to be able to draw, and I want to be able to draw on top of it. So I say, okay, draw the lake, draw that lake object, that horrible Atari 2600 looking water, and then say, okay, I now want to draw, goodness gracious, okay, I get it. I want to draw to my surface instead of to the actual screen. And so what I can then do here is say, okay, I want to set up and I want to clear my entire surface with an alpha of 0. So it could be black, but it's completely see-through at this point. And I want to fill in with my hero all the places there are heroes, And so I can draw that to the surface on top with its correct alpha, and everything else will be transparent. But, like I was saying, all this code, and this is where I really would like you, if you know how to do a better way to do this. I just kind of hacked it together and I got it working, and I'm like, I got to move on and make other videos. So this is my first draft way to do this. Is what I have to say here is, hey, hero, move yourself, basically, instead of shifting the target, I have to shift all the objects I want to draw in relation to where that target is, or where that surface is. So basically this is saying, okay, my X position needs to move in relation to, or the hero's X position needs to move in relation to where the surface is, or the lake, the X and the Y position. Then I can draw myself onto that surface, but then I have to make sure, because world coordinates versus surface coordinates versus all the different coordinate systems, I have to make sure I put it back. So I save it, move it, draw it, and then put it back for every hero in my scene, and there's only one. And then I'd say, okay, I drew every hero because that's the only thing that can reflect, and now I can reset the target back to the main screen. And then now that I'm drawing to the main screen, I could say, hey, on top of, because I did the draw self, on top of the lake, draw what you can, draw my surface, and now this gets a little more complicated again, because I have to draw it mirror imaged, like reflected. I have to supply negative 0.3 here for the Y, and to scrunch it down, and then add 60 pixels so it'll draw backwards correctly. And again, this is where things get complicated. So now that you understand that, let me see if I can move this over a little bit more. You can kind of see things. Okay, so now you can kind of see when I come closer, it's actually looking up here. Like I say, the surface is always 0, 0, but I have to change in relation to this. I need to move the object, and when I do, it sets everything up properly. Well, almost. You can see that we lose a little bit here, and I'm not going to go back and change that. It probably not too hard to fix. But you can see, and it applies to every lake individually, because every lake is doing this individually. And there's a third one, but I want you to see the code. So it takes my guy, essentially moves it as it needs to over here, draws it onto the surface, and then the surface gets scrunched and put where it needs to. So your water is right there. And once you know how to do this, then the sky is the limit with surfaces. But again, this just feels so messy that I have to do this. I don't think there is another better way to do it. And so basic surfaces with a wink and a nod toward the advanced surfaces moving forward. So that's all I wanted to cover in this video. Getting a full screen effect is pretty simple. When you start working otherwise, things can get a little more complicated. And again, maybe it's GameMaker related, or maybe this is just the standard way we do things in the industry. I do not know. So if you have any questions or concerns or improvements, in this case for sure, please let me know at swardb@cod.edu, or you can absolutely get a hold of me here on YouTube. I would love to hear your comments about how to make things better. So as always, thanks for sticking it out with me. Thanks for following my videos. Thanks for liking and subscribing, those of you who do. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great day. Take care. I'll see you then.